The NFL playoffs are here, and you want your team peaking right now heading into the postseason. Well, our team's peaking. We've won 3 weeks in a row. Let's make it 4 on Beat the Book. Welcome to Beat the Book, presented by the Turf Club at Northern Quest Resort and Casino. I'm your host, Keith Osso. After a very humbling first couple of weeks here on Beat the Book, we've really hit our stride. 3 straight winning weeks by Alex Crescente and myself heading into the NFL playoffs. That includes going 6-2 over the last 2 weeks. So you had to fade us early. Now we're riding strong as favorites heading into the playoffs. Coming up a little bit later, we have our picks for the first round of the playoffs, the wild card round. But first, we're going to introduce you to someone from the Visa Network that we've known around here for a few years. You should get to know her too. Great content online, both in the gambling and just sports entertainment. Danielle Alvari joins us now on Beat the Book.
Well, Danielle, thank you for joining us. I know that you have some background in the city of Spokane. Kind of maybe tell everybody how you know Spokane and how I guess you grew up in it.
In this day and age, how do you not know Spokane, right? Especially with the way the Zags have been playing. Well, actually, my dad was a grad assistant basketball coach at Gonzaga. So that's how we got into the Zags, obviously. My dad was actually coaching around the time that John Stockton was there. So that was like our big connection. That was also why I grew up watching the Utah Jazz of all teams. And I grew up in the Bay Area. But my dad's still a huge Gonzaga fan. His license plate literally says like Gonzaga on it. And when we go on holidays, like that's where we go. We like wherever Thanksgiving is where Gonzaga's playing. So that is my connection to Spokane. And I love it so much. I actually almost picked it for school, but I wanted to cheerlead in college and I didn't want to not have a football team. So that was pretty much the only reason. I went there. It was gorgeous. I love going to Spokane.
You've got an extensive background in sports broadcasting, and then now it's led you to VSiN, where you can talk about sports gambling, which is more in the mainstream. We can actually talk about it and not whisper behind closed doors. And I guess maybe give us a little bit about how you got involved in sports betting and what it's been like for you for the last year.
Well, it's very interesting because like you said, it was very hush-hush before. And for me, I think like a lot of people, I didn't really think much of sports betting before and it wasn't allowed to be talked about. So it was almost thought about as taboo. It's something I never thought I would go into actually, which is really interesting because now it's what I do every day. But it actually turned out to be a lot more interesting than I thought because when I got a call from VSiN, they had seen some videos I had made myself actually. So make your own content because that stuff works. And they wanted to bring me on as a host for some of their shows out of Las Vegas. So I picked up from Los Angeles and moved to Las Vegas. That's kind of how I got started in the space. And it was great because I always say it was like betting boot camp because I got to work with, you know, in the sports books at Circa in Las Vegas and at the South Point Sportsbook. So very old school versus a little bit more new school. I got to talk to the sports books who actually make the lines and talk to really seasoned gamblers. So that was like my betting boot camp, which was great. And then I finally got to host my own show. So now I'm doing the Los Angeles City Cast, which is sponsored by Bet Rivers, which is also a sports book. So that's kind of how I got into the space. And at first I was like, well, what's the big deal with betting? Who cares? I don't like to waste my money. I don't go to Vegas and play roulette or anything. I don't gamble at all usually. Now I sports bet like almost every day of the week. And so it's kind of funny how that works out, but I do it for work too. So that's, you know, I'm not a degenerate necessarily. But that said, I do think that it's really interesting because now when you watch regular sports shows on television, they're just trying to figure out who's going to win the game. And like, if you work in sports betting every day, you're like, is that it? You just have to figure out who's going to win. Like we're trying to figure out how many points are going to be scored exactly by each team and who's going to win by how many points exactly. There's a lot more math that goes into it. And you have to be a lot more specific. So I actually think it's going to be a great space for sports to kind of evolve into.
I like to get everybody's opinion and their strategy, I guess, on what they're looking for. And you're talking about playing daily. I've been talking a lot about playing the NFL, which is once a week. You have all week to prepare. When you're playing daily, what is it you're looking for when you start? You open up the book in the morning or the night before. What are you looking for specifically? And sometimes do you bet thinking, never thought I'd do that?
Yeah, all the time. It's interesting because, I mean, I wouldn't advise betting every day unless you have the free time. Like, I literally do it for work. And, like, hopefully what I'm trying to do is provide information to people and research so that they don't have to go do it because they have a life, they have a job. Right. But that said, when I'm looking for games, obviously, you want to try to stick to something that you actually know pretty well. I also made a rule for myself very early not to bet on games that I wasn't actually watching. Like, you'll get access to a sports book and you're like, oh my God, the Warriors are getting like, you're getting plus 20. Like there's a reason, right? There's a reason. So it really helps to stay focused on the sports that you know pretty well or that you enjoy, obviously. And then from there, for example, like I love watching basketball, but actually NBA was by far my like least profitable sport last season. And that's another thing too, is you keep track. It's hard again to keep track of every single bet you make unless you're, doing it like every day like I am. But at least get an idea for what sports you know well and what's working well for you, and then focus on those ones. And as far as like the NBA, for example, things that people don't really consider sometimes is like when teams are traveling a lot, like if they're on a back-to-back or if they played 3 games in 3 days, like they're just not going to be the same team they would be if they were fully rested. So there's just little edges where you're just trying to see if you can get on the right side of the number.
I want to talk to you about props a little bit because I think they're fun. I think that it's, you can win your prop in the first 5 minutes. It could go down to the very last rebound of a game in a 20-point bloodbath. What do you like about, because I see that you do play some props. What is it that you look for in those, and how much fun can those be either early or late in the game?
Well, to be honest with you, I don't spend a lot of time handicapping props because it's just one step further in. Like you really have to look at individual players, but it can be a lot of fun, like you said, because it can cash so early, right? Especially as it pertains to like the NFL, if you have over a receiving prop or over a passing prop or over an interception prop. If you're Matt Stafford, that's one I've played recently. And sacks, I've been playing Aaron Donald over his sacks prop. That there was like a stretch where he hit it like 6 games in a row, and it was just money train. It was so much fun. And then that happens early in the game, and then you're like, cool, like now I'm just playing with house money. But that can get dangerous because then you're like, well, now what I want to bet? There's live betting. Like maybe now I've won some money. Maybe I'm going to play with the house money now.
You talk to me about parlays. I started the season. First NFL game this year was Tampa Bay and Dallas. I did a 5-way parlay with props, and at half it was in the bag, and it still took until there was 2 minutes left in the game to cash it. So, A, you can make some money doing the parlays, but B, it's so tough to cash on those things. What are your stances on those?
Well, so because I was in Vegas with the old school gamblers, I was kind of, I'm not going to say trained in the way, but I kind of accepted that parlays were a little bit, they always say like they're kind of for suckers, right? But I think they're for fun. Absolutely. And like you'll see some really good handicappers like that I follow on Twitter, for example, that will put out really crazy parlays that are worth like, plus 1,000 or plus 10,000 or something crazy. The odds are that long for a reason. It's a long shot, like the chances that it's going to hit, right? But those are fun to play occasionally. And if you hit one, you could argue that it covered all the money you spent trying to hit a parlay that year or more. It could be more than that. So I get the appeal of parlays. I think that as sports betting grows, it's important to remind people that are newer to sports betting that that is probably not going to be your best way to make money. That's actually probably your best way to lose money. And if you get lucky, you hit one, like, congrats, that's amazing. The odds were against you.
We got the NFL going into the playoffs, and thankfully we're not doing what we were doing last week, is figuring out who's going to play starters and who's not. So we go back to actual football where people are trying to play to win no matter what. We're not playing for a tie or taking timeouts or whatever it may be.
Oh, the tie was so fun, though.
It was. I was rooting for it so hard because what a way for Pittsburgh to get knocked out, right? The last game of the season, overtime, a tie. It's the slowest death by paper cuts in history, and then they called timeout and changed everything. But anyway, I digress.
It's hard because I don't want to see any more Big Ben, but I do love Mike Tomlin. So.
Yeah, I know. It's kind of I respect him so much for a team I hate, so I'm with you. So going into the NFL playoffs, I guess do you go back to maybe where we were a couple weeks ago, looking at teams rather than don't take last week into account because some teams maybe didn't play as hard as others?
Well, right. It depends on what you're talking about, right? Like, for example, for me, like I'm paying attention to the LA teams very closely, and I had 2 overtime games to watch, and there was seeding on the line for one, and there was literally getting into the playoffs on the line for the other one. So those actually had some value there. But then, of course, you have the other games that like didn't mean anything at all. And then what are you supposed to do with like Jaguars beating the Colts? It doesn't matter. They're both got in now. But it was a mess, definitely. So there were moments, there were things to pay attention to for sure for the teams that were actually playing for something, like you said. And now everybody's playing for everything at this point. So I wouldn't necessarily throw out last week. And it's hard to look at even like the last couple weeks because with the NFL, on any given week this season, because of the deal, like issues with COVID-19, right, you might have had a different team out there. And so, for example, I'm going to use the Chargers. They've been very inconsistent this season, especially against the spread. And some of that came down to, for them, like missing Corey Linsley or missing Austin Eckler or right, people like this were really, really big to this team because they were all out at the same time. Like normally we only see like a quarterback is probably going to be valuable to moving a line. But when you have like 3 or 4 of your starters out, or for example, like the Ravens had a bunch of defensive backs out and everyone rushed to bet like passing props against them. And you forgot this is still the Ravens. Like this is still a team that like they don't bring in bad defensive guys. Even the backups are like figuring it out. So it is something where it's hard to look back on the last couple of weeks, because even when I look back on weeks now, I'm like, wait a minute, why did this happen? Who was out? And so that's just something with this season specifically too. You have to look and be like, is there an asterisk on that game? Who was missing? And are they missing still? Or are they back in swing? Because now, you know, the Rams, for example, they've been having a lot of player personnel turnover as well. So just trying to pay attention to that and being like, who's actually playing? Because that's what I need to know.
I got to ask you, you can answer this in a gambling sense or not, but since we're, you know, here in Eastern Washington and you cover LA, our boy Cooper Kupp doing some amazing things down there this year.
Yeah.
How high did those props get for him? Because I got to think it was like over under 115 yards or something crazy.
Well
like
over
that.
100.
And then he'd still get it. And B, just how much fun has he been to watch down there in person?
Oh, Cooper Kupp's been the most fun. It's, you know, like that he's one of the sweethearts of the NFL, I feel like, right now, especially after he gave that post-game interview and he gave this really like nuanced breakdown and everybody was like, oh, he knows what he's talking about. I'll say he doesn't look like he would know what he's talking about. Just like, I don't know, he doesn't look like he would, and he's just really intelligent when he speaks. And so he's been a lot of fun. His props have been a lot of fun. A prop that was fun to play that wasn't horribly juiced, just meaning that you have to like lay more money with the sports book to make more money, was his longest reception prop. For some reason, like it didn't matter. He just kept hitting it. Like they kept making it bigger and he just kept hitting it. It was like, okay, 25 yards, 30 yards, 35, like, and you could just keep hitting those Cooper Kupp longest reception props because you know Matt Stafford's going to go to him.
That's amazing. And with the Seahawks being out, I mean, I got to go Rams all the way. So now, is there a team that's not a 1 seed? If you're looking at maybe futures now that the playoffs are starting, is there a team that you're fine? I think the Rams they would be my choice, and since you're in LA, that would make sense that you would have that opinion. But they're my choice, the non-1 seed. If I'm going to put money on somebody making the Super Bowl or winning it, do you have a team that you think is not a 1 seed that's got a pretty good odds to, or it looks good for you?
I haven't looked at Super Bowl odds closely yet because I don't play a lot of futures personally.
Gotcha.
Mostly because I'm a millennial and I want my payout immediately. I have no attention span for it to be all season. And people who play win totals, oh my God, if you had the Chargers over 9.5 wins and they just lost in that fashion and you were this close, and you waited all season long, you locked your money up with that, I can't. But what I will say about the Super Bowl, for me, unfortunately, I tend to think that the cream of the crop is going to rise. And like people are talking about parity in the NFL and stuff like that. But the teams that are the shortest odds right now, like now is maybe not the best time to get the best odds on them unless you're going to look for kind of like a dark horse, like what you're asking me. The Rams for me are not somebody I would bet on right now because I would not bet on Matt Stafford right now. Like gotcha. I was telling someone the other day that I could see that the 49ers advancing this weekend and the Rams not. Like that's a reality. So it's hard because the Rams are definitely built to do it. So I understand why you would put your money there. But for me, there's nobody who's a longer shot who's like, oh, they could do this. They're a dark horse. I think that the teams that are kind of the shorter odds are who we're going to be seeing in the actual Super Bowl.
Thank you for joining us.
Plenty to talk about, plenty to bet on.
Yeah, I look forward to seeing you in the future again. She's a part of the Visa Network, Danielle Alvari. You can follow her on Twitter and Instagram. A lot of good, fun content in there. Pretty much daily videos at this point, it's looking like.
Oh, geez, it's a lot, yeah. I don't know how these kids do it. Gen Z.
These kids, says the one that just self-professed as a millennial. So, hey, thank you so much.
Thanks, Keith.
Once again, you can follow Danielle at Danielle Alvari on Twitter and on Instagram. There will be a link to her on my Twitter as well. A lot of fun, someone a little bit of Spokane history in the back pocket, but a lot of fun with her content. Give her a follow. You won't regret it. She's a lot of fun and your LA expert as well. All right, our picks for the week. Going into wild card weekend, the beauty of this week is that we have a lot of rematches. And not just rematches, but rematches from recent weeks. If there was a game where, say, the Steelers and the Chiefs played in week 2, I wouldn't really put a lot into that. But the fact that they played just a few weeks ago, I absolutely am going to look at that when I'm looking at these games. We have some lines that are very favorable because of those rematches, and they didn't make a lot of sense at first. But they're starting to move and starting to look a little bit more like what you would think. So, first pick, we're going New England at Buffalo. Now, remember, Buffalo went to New England just back in week 16, so just a few weeks ago when both teams were playing for their playoff lives, and Buffalo won pretty easily. They handily won that game 33-21. So they get a 12-point win on the road where Josh Allen went crazy, 380 total yards and 3 touchdowns. Now, the only thing that really kept New England in this game at all was Damian Harris, the running back, had 3 touchdown runs and ran for over 100 yards. So expect New England to try to run the ball, control the clock in a very, very cold environment. It's supposed to be in the single digits at kickoff Saturday night in western New York. So pay attention to that weather, but I'm going to go with Buffalo having an easy time at home. If you can beat New England on the road by 12, you can certainly beat them at home by more than 4. So I'm going to lay 4 points, take Buffalo, lock that in earlier in the week. Pick number 2, Kansas City playing at home against Pittsburgh. Again, these two teams played the same week 16. When Pittsburgh had to have this, they thought, to keep their season going and keep the postseason hopes alive. Well, they lost by 26 points. They lost by 26 points with the Chiefs playing without Travis Kelce, who was out because of COVID. So the fact that it's 12.5 is a huge line for the postseason, but just 3 weeks ago, Kansas City beat them by 26. So 12.5 doesn't seem that big of a hill to climb. Keep in mind, Pittsburgh, one of the worst passing offenses to make the playoffs in I don't know how long. Meaning, if Kansas City does what they should do, take control of that game early, make Pittsburgh have to throw it, Big Ben really doesn't have anything to offer to threaten that defense, and I think they're in a world of hurt. So as long as Kansas City scores early, which they normally do, I see them running away from this in this game. And remember, it was 36-10 when they played 3 weeks ago, and Pittsburgh scored with under 3 minutes to go a touchdown. So it was actually 36-3 with 3 minutes to go in the game, and then they gave up a touchdown. Kansas City did. I really like that 12.5 at home, even though it's double digits in the playoffs. I think Kansas City absolutely rolls Pittsburgh, and this is an easy pick in this game. Also, Tyreek Hill missed all of practice in that matchup and was pretty ineffective in the game because of COVID. He's going to be a factor in the playoffs, you better believe it. Last pick, we're going with the Rams. Oh, everybody's staying away from the Rams because Matthew Stafford's throwing it to the wrong team. While this is true, his interception numbers have risen quite a bit recently, but in their 2 matchups against the Cardinals this year, Stafford has 5 touchdown passes to 1 interception. That's over 2 games, not over 1. I really like that when looking at this betting is you can take both games and combine them. Now, Kyler Murray played well in both games. James Conner had 2 touchdowns in each of those games, so I do expect the Cardinals to be able to score. So you might want to look at that 49.5 point over-under and might want to look at that over. But I'm going with the Rams -4. As long as Matthew Stafford doesn't turn the ball over, they're going to win this easily. With the running game reestablished, Sony Michel's playing well. Now they have Cam Akers back. You've got Cooper Kupp, you've got Tyler Higbee, you've got Odell Beckham Jr., and you've got that defensive line, and you've got Jalen Ramsey. The Rams on paper should win this by well over 4. I think people are hesitant because of what's going on with Stafford, but I'm saying not going to be a problem, at least for 1 week. He'll silence his doubters, and I will take the Rams -4. I am not touching San Francisco, Dallas. The sexiest upset pick of the week is the 49ers to beat the Cowboys straight up, and they're getting 3 points on the road. I don't like it when it's too popular. I'm staying away from San Francisco at Dallas. Dallas clearly has more offensive weapons if they can put it together. Can Dak Prescott win this game on his shoulder? Staying away from that one. And Tampa Bay, Philly, I have a strong feeling Tampa Bay will cover the 8.5, but I'm staying away from it just because I like the other 3 games that much more. Give me Buffalo -4, Rams -4, KC -12.5, and hopefully we're looking at winning week number 4 in a row heading into the divisional round of the playoffs. Now, as always, good luck to everybody this week. Enjoy your betting, and everybody enjoy the games.